I never imagined a simple weekend trip would change everything. When I married James, I knew that blending families wouldn't be easy. His son, Ryan, had been distant from the start. He wasn't rude or hostile, just closed off. He kept to himself, always locked in his room with his headphones on or lost in his phone. James told me it was just how Ryan had always been, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath the surface. Ryan had lost his mother when he was 12. Though I never tried to replace her, I made every effort to be there for him. I cooked his favorite meals, asked him about his day, and even sat through hours of a video game tournament just to find some common ground. But no matter what I did, he remained guarded, never letting me get too close. Then came the conference. James was scheduled to speak at an industry event out of state, and we had planned to make a trip out of it. I wasn't particularly interested in business seminars, but I looked forward to a short getaway with my husband. Ryan had agreed to come along, though I suspected it was more out of obligation than interest. At the last minute, James had to cancel due to an emergency at work. "You and Ryan should still go," he said. "The hotel is already booked, and it might be good for you two to spend some time together." Ryan didn't seem thrilled, but he didn't object either. "Yeah, whatever," he said with a shrug. So just like that, we were off. The drive was quiet. Ryan had his earbuds in, staring out the window as the miles passed by. I didn't force conversation. Instead, I let him be, hoping that maybe, without his father around, he'd open up just a little. By the time we arrived at the hotel, it was late. The woman at the front desk apologized, explaining that due to an overbooking issue, we'd have to share a room with 2 twin beds instead of getting separate ones. It wasn't ideal, but I didn't see the big deal. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed uneasy, but he simply nodded and followed me to the elevator. The room was small but comfortable. I took one bed, and Ryan took the other. He immediately pulled out his phone and turned away from me, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. I didn't push him to talk. Instead, I got ready for bed, turning off the lights and settling in for the night. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to an odd sound. At first, I thought it was the air conditioning kicking on, but then I heard it again whispering. It was faint, barely audible over the hum of the heater. I turned over in bed and saw Ryan, sitting up, his phone clutched in both hands. His body was tense, shoulders hunched forward. His breathing was uneven, almost shaky. "Ryan," I whispered. He jumped and quickly turned off his phone. "It's nothing," he muttered, lying back down with his back to me. I hesitated, but decided not to push him. If he wanted to talk, he would. The next morning at breakfast, I noticed how exhausted he looked. His eyes were shadowed with dark circles, and he barely touched his food. I tried making small talk, but he only responded with nods or one-word answers. "Are you feeling okay?" I finally asked. Ryan hesitated before shaking his head. "Didn't sleep well," he mumbled. I let it go, but something about his behavior nagged at me. There was something wrong, something he wasn't saying. Throughout the day, Ryan barely engaged with anything. We explored a few nearby attractions, but he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone. At one point, he disappeared for nearly an hour, only to return looking even more withdrawn than before. That night, I lay awake, listening. Sure enough, just past midnight, I heard it again, the whispering. This time, I turned carefully, peeking just enough to see what he was doing. His phone screen was dim, but I could still make out the text messages. There were dozens of them, all from a single contact. The name at the top made my breath catch in my throat.
Mom.
I froze. My heart pounded as I watched him type, his fingers trembling over the screen. His whispered words sent chills down my spine. "I miss you. I'm sorry. I should have done something. I don't know what to do anymore." Tears stung my eyes as I realized what was happening. Ryan wasn't just grieving, he was trapped in a cycle of guilt and loss, reaching out to someone who could never answer. I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Ryan," I said softly. He stiffened. His hands clenched around his phone, as if trying to shield it from me. "You don't have to go through this alone," I said gently. He didn't move at first. For a long moment, I thought he would ignore me, pretend he hadn't heard. But then, slowly, he turned toward me. His face was barely visible in the dim light, but I could see the unshed tears in his eyes. He swallowed hard. I miss her. I sat up. I know. I keep thinking, what if I had done something different? What if I had been better? Maybe she wouldn't have. His voice cracked, and he looked away. My heart broke for him. Ryan, her passing wasn't your fault. He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. I used to ignore her calls. I was always too busy with my own stuff. I thought there would be more time. His hands clenched into fists. But there wasn't. I took a deep breath, my own emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Regret is a heavy thing to carry. But she wouldn't want you to punish yourself like this. He wiped at his eyes. I don't know how to stop. I hesitated, then reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. You talk about it. You let people in. You remember her, but you don't let the past keep you from living your life. He let out a shaky breath. I don't know if I can. You don't have to do it alone. For the first time, Ryan didn't pull away. Instead, he sat there, staring at the floor, his walls slowly crumbling. That night, we didn't go back to sleep right away. We sat in that dimly lit room, talking about his mom, who she was, what she loved, the memories he cherished. It was painful, but it was also healing. In the days that followed, something changed between us. Ryan still wasn't the most talkative person, but he no longer kept me at arm's length. He let me in little by little. The weight he had carried alone for so long was finally shared. And that made all the difference.